Hello everyone, welcome to the LARP Tales podcast. My name is Oliver. On this episode, Robyn and myself are joined by our friend Martin. Martin is a LARPer and plays in the Empire LRP game here in the UK. Martin is an actor and teaches acting. In this conversation, we had an interesting delve into the differences between acting and role-playing, what place acting and its skill set comes into role-playing games, and vice versa. Martin's character plays in the Nation of Dawn, so we have some fun Dawnish stories for you. We talk about character loss, we talk about bleed, we talk about improv. It's a great conversation. Before we get into it though, the usual housekeeping. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Make sure that you click subscribe if you're new to the channel. If you're listening on an audio platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a 5-star review on those. We also do have a Patreon. We have a discount link down in the description as well for a discount on your first Empire LARP ticket if you fancy going. That gives us a little kickback as well. There's also other links down there if you want to support us in differing ways. You're of course under no obligation to do any of that. We're just glad to have you along. And with all that out of the way, let's get into our conversation with Martin. Hello everyone, welcome to the LARP Tales podcast. My name is Oliver, I'm here with Robyn, and also joining us is our friend Martin. Thank you for coming on, Martin.
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
So let's start at the beginning, Martin. How did you get into LARP?
Well, I was 16 when I first went to LARP, which is 40 years ago. I was kind of doing adventure games on computers, which were all kind of text-based at that time. And I hadn't actually done any D&D, but I'd done kind of very similar kind of board games and stuff. And then in one of the computer magazines, they advertised Treasure Trap at Peckforton Castle, and they were like these week-long holidays. So I kind of convinced my mum that I should have that as my 16th birthday present, and my doing well at my O levels, because we did O levels in those days. just to set how old this was.
Yeah, people can guess what year. Yeah,
1984. So
yeah. So what is it like? It was like an experience style LARP style holiday camp thing, was it? Or?
Yeah, so basically it was a castle up in near Chester, Peckforton Castle, which I think is a hotel now, but it was they had the whole site, including the grounds as well. And usually I think like year round at weekends they would have like little linears and stuff. So it's very much like Labyrinth.
Okay, yeah.
If you've ever been to Labyrinth. And so you do a linear, and then you'd come out of it, and you weren't really in character, but they had kind of an in character area which you could kind of socialize in outside of that as well.
Interesting.
Now for me, I live right down on the south coast, so that wasn't really a possibility to get up to Chester, and I'm obviously 16. I didn't drive, or relying on parents. So when they advertised a week's holiday, it was like, well, that's amazing. And they'd set up a few of the kind of rooms as kind of dorms, and then we all just kind of slept in bunk beds in these dorms. So a bit like being at a small event, a scout camp or whatever. But you're in a castle, and the whole thing took place in this castle. And this is like early doors. So instead of just they'd have rooms like in the dungeon down in the bottom, which were not only dark, like no light at all, but filled with grass smoke. So you literally couldn't see a thing, and it would sting your eyes, and your eyes would be watering, but you didn't care because you were fighting orcs. It didn't matter.
So it was like a proper like you're saying, like Labyrinth. So we've had, I think Andy Raff came on and he talked about, I think it was Labyrinth, right, Robyn?
I think it was, yeah.
I actually looked up some of the sheets from that, and they're like really complex little sheets that you like fill out. Was it a bit like that where you had to like go and just do the encounter, and then that was kind of it?
Yeah, and you had like a ref go round with you, and they battle boarded it. So after every
Yeah, that's
encounter
it.
with some
Battleborn,
orcs,
yeah.
they'd go through it. In the very first form at Peckforton, they used to put dye on the edge of the blades, and then they would look at how much dye was on you, and then they'd decide, oh, that area's got ruined because you got so much dye on you, or oh, that was just a graze, so just 1 point of damage on that area.
That kind of makes, because I guess
like
I guess
that.
it's like paintballing, but with swords.
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Obviously, we didn't have the high quality costumes that people have these days. I don't think people would like their
I
ball
was
gowns.
just gonna, yeah, I was just gonna ask as well. Actually, like, what was the kit like for those types of things?
I always describe it as and that it was kind of young people with their mother's curtains, as cloaks,
Yeah.
and you might have a tunic, which was a sheet that you'd kind of cut a hole in,
Yeah.
and maybe you might. Well, I can't remember anyone drawing anything on there. I think some people have more sophisticated kit, but a lot of us, you'd be wearing jeans and trainers underneath it,
Yeah. Was there a lot of, because there's a lot of crossover now. Was there a lot of crossover between like reenactors and LARPing back then? Because there didn't seem to be much, because a lot of the costume standards in LARP come from people who reenact,
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some that crossed over, because I think there's always been a bit of a crossover. But certainly, I know that reenactors, like back in the day, they used to shame, because I've kind of been in the reenactor world as well. They used to kind of shame LARPers. Like, you didn't tell people you were a LARPer if you did reenactment, because it was they really bloody rubber swords and
take it seriously, don't they?
Yeah.
It's still a little bit like that, but there's a lot more crossover now. I think because the like you say, the kit standards are so high now that people like to jump over from one to the other. So you're an actor, Martin, right? So what was your interest in acting, or what pushed you towards that LARP at that young age, or were you trying that out and then you went, oh, I like the idea of role playing?
I think like, if I'm honest, right, I think I played a bard in D&D, and I kind of got into the idea. I like the romantic idea of being a performer, and that kind of snowballed, and it wasn't until I was 25 that I actually kind of started looking at acting, and it was.
Okay, yeah.
But I mean, and here's kind of maybe too much information and sharing a lot about myself, but I'm a recovering addict, and I kind of needed something to replace the hole that drugs and alcohol had kind of filled beforehand. And so I spent a kind of year kind of looking to try and work out what I was doing with my life, or 3 years, sorry, trying to look out, and I kind of fell into acting kind of accidentally, but it fulfilled that kind of yearning, to do something creative, to work with other people, and to just get something out there that made me feel like I was good at something, and was competent, and was adding something to the world. And it was more that, in a way, than the fact that it was acting. I think it was just being able to. I mean, I loved the audience. I loved getting that kind of applause from the audience. And I put it down to that kind of almost like I need an instant gratification when delayed gratification does not work for me. And so I've been trying to be a writer, and that's such a long delayed gratification.
It's the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. And I was struggling. I was really struggling, and it was only when I started doing. I actually was a performance poet before I was an actor. And that kind of went from the writing to poetry to performance poetry. And then people, like actors that I knew that down in Brighton, would just turn around and go, you should be acting, Martin, because you're actually quite good at this. And that kind of prompted me to go and look for it, and then just one thing fell into place, and before I knew it, I was acting.
Yeah. And so was that, because it sounds like LARP just ran kind of perpendicular to it, because the way you're describing what you like about acting, it sounds very different from what you actually do get out of LARP, because LARP's performative, but it's not too. I mean, it's to your other players, but it's more intimate, isn't it? It's not standing up and just going, okay, you're the audience, and like you say, you get the gratification from that. Is it a different type of gratification, or do you just look for something different in LARP than you do in acting?
So There are definite crossovers, absolutely, and I think LARP has really helped my acting, and we can come back to that at another point. But um, with I'm someone who kind of, I like feelings, and I think I'm someone who came from a place of not being able to express myself unless I, except in situations where I really didn't want to. And then I've always been a crier, from a young age I've cried, and that's as as a man that often felt very embarrassing, before I got came to terms with that as a young man. Um, and so I kind of built up very, very strong defenses about letting my feelings in. So I think I really enjoy in acting, like being able to access my feelings and being express those feelings. And I also get that from LARP. I love emotional stuff. I really love that whole, I mean, I don't necessarily want my character to be experiencing trauma all the time, but I don't. But when it when it happens, oh yeah, it's great. Those moments really kind of make an event.
Yeah, like everything that you're like describing there about what you love about acting, with being able to bring out those emotions and to feel things. It just sounds so much like LARP as well. Like the whole, like, for me, everything you just said about acting is how I feel about LARP, that way of accessing emotions that in other walks of life, like, it's not always acceptable, or doesn't always feel acceptable to go ahead and to cry at something, or to shout at something, or to like be passionate, or really let that shine out. But it's just, it's sounding like the two of them are just so similar, the way they run alongside one another.
Yeah, and I'm I like to I like to be able to let go, like really, like really just let go and not worry about the consequences. But of course you can only do that within a very kind of boundaried space. So acting is like that. The stage, you've got very hard boundaries about what you're allowed to express, what's relevant to the character. There's safety things, like you never actually physicalize your anger if you're fighting, it's all choreographed. So there's some technical aspects you have to learn to be able to do that, but actually being able to really fully let go and know that you're safe in that space is very liberating. And to some degree that works in LARP, although LARP has the boundaries are very kind of fuzzy, and that's I think one of the dangers of LARP.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. Like, do you think it's not quite as safe because of that? Because you are, yeah, like you said, you are literally in a controlled environment when you're acting, but when you're like you say, when you're in a LARP, it can go too far almost,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's there's kind of out of character influences as well as in character influences, and it gets a bit muddled. And then different play styles as well. So there's people who are much more comfortable with one type of play style than another. And so particularly at like a big fest event like Empire, you're in this melting pot where the boundaries aren't actually clearly defined, and what one person thinks is appropriate is not what someone else might think is appropriate, or what they can handle, what they're safe. And I think I think as a community, I think we're learning that, and I think we're beginning to build kind of strategies to make it safer. So I think LARP is definitely slightly more. You have to be careful, I think.
Yeah, do you think there's a difference? So how would you define like the difference between like role playing and acting? Like, why don't we call it live action acting, or why isn't acting called role play?
So there's a couple of things, and I'd almost go back to my teacher, like my acting teacher, like my big mentor that a guy called Scott Williams. Look him up; he's fucking amazing. But he actually defined acting as needing a script. Like, he was very, like, which a lot of people will disagree with. A lot of actors will be offended by that idea, because obviously you also have improv. But improv is completely different to working with scripts, and it was something that I ended up learning how to do scripts because I was much better at doing improv because of D&D, because of role play, of various kinds. And I could never understand why I could get quite emotional with improv, but I couldn't get very emotional with scripts until I met Scott Williams, and he was very clear that the two disciplines are completely different. when you're dealing with a script, you don't have to do any storytelling. All you do is you just have to be in the moment and expressing yourself, and you can let go and not worry about anything. And you set it all up beforehand, before a scene. You know what your character's after, the stakes, you know all of this stuff, and then you can just you've learnt your lines, all of that. You've learnt your choreography. All of that is the boundary that keeps it safe. That means that once you've learnt that and you're not thinking about it, you can be absolutely present in the moment and allow whatever experience you have to come out. That's different, I think, to improv, where improv on stage, you're having to build the world. You're having to create the story. You're a storyteller, as well as you're writing it, as well as being in it, and that's a different place, and it can feel quite different. And then in LARP, in some ways it's similar to having a script, in the sense that you've got this very clear defined character and motivations, and what the scene is, in the sense what you're after in the scene. And and then there's other people who might be opposing you in that, and that creates the tension and the drama. But you're also, I think, because of that lack of the safety of the boundaries, I think maybe that's it. It means that you've got to be a little bit aware. You've got to be outside yourself to some degree, so that you're managing your safety and the safety of people around you in a way that maybe you don't need to so much particularly in a scripted stage show.
I think it's because the script is so parted from you, so you're literally just looking at line. You know what you're signing up for. I think this is what I've described it as, is like you're signing up to be like, right, I'm gonna be in the mind, especially if you're playing something that is very unlike you, like a very bad person or something, and you're like, right, this is I'm signing up to be in the mindset, and I know from the script how this person is going to react when I say that. I know what's going to happen. But in like an improv or a LARP, you go, right, I'm going to act like this, and I can guess how people are going to react, but they might completely blindside you. And a lot of people don't sign up for that, so someone might act a certain way, and then someone's coming at them, they're like, oh, I didn't I didn't really expect this.
And particularly, I think, if you're doing LARP at small events, that's different from doing LARP at a fest event. The two can be quite considerably different, because I think at a small event, it's the definition of the actual event that you're doing is much more tightly kind of described, so more, better what you're getting into when you do it, and also what type of game it is and what the rules are. And you also the kind of ref, plot team, crew to player, is the ratios are much better, and therefore it can be guided, I think, in a much better way than at a fest system. You're just with a load of players, and then there's some refs around somewhere, if you can find, and you're every event you go to, even I've been going to Empire since the beginning. I bump into people I've never met before, and I don't know how they're going to respond and how they're going to react. So whereas, again, a small event, there's more chance that you're going to have an idea of who the players are. You won't, if it's an event that only goes off one or two times, and you probably won't have met everyone there, but there's something about it that is more, I think it's a bit safer in a way, which then allows people to be freer in that space.
Yeah. So I mean, is it good advice to tell people to, because a lot of people will give sort of improv advice for role playing. They'll say things, oh yeah, yes, and things. Do you think that's actually good advice, or do you think it can be so different? Because I know you've already alluded to LARPing's helped your acting, but do you think it's a good idea to look at LARP through that improv lens at all, or do you think you should just act as a player of a game?
I think I think improv doesn't entirely fit what we do, so I think I think there's things you can draw from it, and I think definitely it's worth looking into, to get an idea from. But like you say, yes, and yes and isn't what you do in LARP, you know.
Mm.
Partly yes and really, I would say in improv is about world building. So there's no point getting into an argument about the world, because that just gets boring and you know, the audience gets confused. So if you're saying, oh, there's a chair over there, if the other person goes, no, there isn't, you know, you don't get anywhere, you get stuck. So the other person goes, oh yes, there is, but it's got a broken leg, you know. So you're building, and the world becomes fuller and fuller, and the audience is kind of taking along in that journey. In LARP, to some degree, the world is kind of there already.
Yeah.
And I think I'll tell you where yes and comes in very good is when you start doing those kind of little bit where you're you know, on those kind of, you're with a couple of friends, you know, and you start talking about background which your characters share,
yes,
but you haven't established, because
Yes.
then you're narratively storytelling, and you need to yes and there, because if someone says this happened, you don't want to really get into an argument about it, because then it breaks down that kind of creative collaboration.
Yeah, 100%. That's literally what I think we both did with our new characters, Robin, right? We had people that go, okay, I sent my backstory to a few people and went, here's a backstory. Some people like fleshed a little bit out. Other people literally came up to me on the first event and was just like, oh, Damon, how are you doing? And then they turned to their friend and were like, oh yeah, me and Damon did this in Desato. And I was like, oh yeah, remember when we did this, you know, that's a perfect yes and moment.
Yeah, like
And
I literally did that with you, Martin. Where you're one of the people that I sent background and things to, and I remember the first time playing Nymeria and actually bumping into Robert really quickly and having a conversation about something that had happened in the past, and I remember that like back and forth being like, oh yeah, now I've built. This is the relationship we have now. We've built, we've established this, and we've added little bits into the background. And it's something that since that conversation with yourself, I've definitely started doing that a lot more with people, like bumping into them, and just like Oliver just said, like, you know, do you remember that time we were stuck there and we ended up, you know, getting involved in this fight over here, and then you're like, oh yeah, and then you chucked that chair, and then we had to, and like I think it's just so much fun creating that, and that, like you were saying, really does flow into that yes and. There's one thing I do want to ask you though, and this is more about role play in the moment. How do you navigate a situation in LARP if you are role playing with someone, and let's say it's someone new and you are in quite a serious, let's say Glory Square, someone's died, you're in a serious like situation with them and you're giving it your all, and then you're realizing that they may be out of character, don't look like they are quite on board with this level of role play, or like they want to tone it back. How do you navigate those situations, and how do you read those as well?
I mean, I think, I mean, it's always going to be you're kind of running off your intuition. So you know, which can sometimes be a good guide and sometimes can be rubbish. You know, like you know, I think. I think, you know, if you're seeing it, then you're aware of it. So that I think you have to adapt to that. You know, if you're not seeing it, then you're just going to blindly run up, you know, flatten them with whatever you're doing, and that's just going to happen. And then maybe that's an apology afterwards if someone gets upset. But I think, yeah, if you're aware of it, then I think you can adapt to it. And I think it's, you know, I would always say, like, bring it in character, you know, like, so you become aware that the person opposite you in character is being uncomfortable with your emotions or what you're doing, and you can, I think you can make the choice. I think there's always, you know, as a playing a character, you can always make a choice about how you respond to something. And so I think you make the choice, like, because you're out of character, you're going, oh, I don't really want to, you know, upset this person. I'm coming on a bit too strong here, and you know, and then make the choice that I don't want to upset their character right now, and then you still stay in that character headset rather than kind of feeling that you're jumping out of character. And it might, because I think, like, one of my beliefs about character is that that we often when I talk about actors, and I think LARPers do this a bit as well, but definitely actors, is that they can be very rigid about what a character, oh, my character wouldn't do that. But the reality of people is that we don't know how we're going to respond in certain situations. I might say here and go, well, if that happened to me, I wouldn't do that. But if it hasn't happened to me, I don't know how I'm going to respond. And often we respond in ways that are, when we're put into stressful situations, we respond in ways that utterly surprise us, sometimes shame us. Sometimes they surprise us and we're like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was that courageous. So I think we can give our characters more latitude than we might otherwise subscribe to, because I think you want to create a character, and you think, oh, they're like this, they get angry very easily, or they don't like that and they always get upset by it. But I think even then, that's just a guideline. Don't let it overrun every moment.
Yeah, do you think expectations kind of limit you in that way? Because I know a lot of people will. I mean, the trope is like, oh, I want to be my character. I want to be like, the loner, badass ranger or whatever that everybody respects and thinks they're the greatest. And then they walk around the field, or they play across the D&D table, and no one's giving their awesome character the respect they deserve. But that's all through your expectations, not your actions.
And I think it's very much again, like I think at a big fest system like Empire, you can't project anything out onto other people. The only thing you can change is yourself. People will react to you how they react to you, and in some ways it's a bit unfair that you're faced with, if you're someone who does struggle with your confidence, then you might struggle to project yourself and be heard by other people, and it's in a fest system where there's so much competition in Empire. People don't even mean to do it. They're just so on their own thing they're doing, that I think it can be very difficult to don't have any expectations like that. People are, when you're amongst your group of friends, when you're in certain nice environments, then people are going to look out for you, and they're going to, and Empire's getting better and better at putting kind of structures in, like with the MC, there's none of the shouting over each other that there used to be, and everyone's standing up, and everything's getting much more considerate. But there's always going to be some level, because we're competing for attention, we're competing for time, and that's always going to be there.
So Martin, you mentioned that LARP has helped you like with your acting, and what kind of ways is it helped in that direction?
So for me, like, the challenge has always been to be emotional. That's the one that intimidates me. I want to be, I'd love to be a Robert De Niro, or I don't know, a Jude Law, or I'd love to be that kind of character, that actor who can like really convincingly portray like highly emotional situations, and I haven't always been able to do that very well. And in fact, most of my kind of path through acting has been learning how to do that. And where LARPs really come in handy is that I've always found it easier there than I have, on the stage, or doing a play, with a script and stuff. And so what it's done is boosted my confidence. When there's times when I've sat there and I've gone, oh, maybe I'm a rubbish actor, that imposter syndrome comes in, maybe I should just quit, I'm not good enough at this. Then I go, I'm at a LARP and I suddenly burst into tears for whatever reason, like something set me off. I'm like, oh, I can do this. I've just, it is possible. And also like understanding how my emotions express themselves. So one of the ones that used to really throw me as an actor was that, like, your character or my character would receive some shocking piece of information that's upsetting, and I wouldn't feel anything, and I'll be like, oh, I should be feeling it right now. I've just had this information, I should be feeling it. And it's through LARP where, I've had some sad bit of information, my character's found out, or I've had a confrontation and I felt nothing to begin with. But then like 10 minutes later, I start feeling it and I get upset and I start crying. And it's like, oh, that's just my process. That's my grief process. That's how I I take things on board. In fact, when I'm in that stressful situation, I button down and I don't really feel anything. It's only when things feel safer that it starts to come out. And so knowing how that works and understanding that's me and that's okay, then I've been able to take that into my acting and go, yeah, so the way I will do this character is going to be similar because that's how my emotional process works, and it's truthful and it's real, and that's what I bring to a part. Not trying to be, I can't make myself be a character that works differently because that's not how I work. So therefore, it becomes part of my understanding and translation of what that character is.
But for me, it's kind of like you say, LARP kind of shows you a lot about what your emotions do, and and how uncontrollable some of them actually are. When someone says, "Oh, uncontrollable," people think of things like anger and things like that. But I'm a little bit like you. So in stressful situations, where there's panic, I'm usually quite, like in real life, I'm quite calm. That's my initial reaction is to go, right, okay, if something happens, let's do this. And so I being cool in like on the battlefield is really easy for me. But like recently, so with my new character Damon, he doesn't show so much, like he doesn't, because Godric was crying all the time, because like you might, I am a crier. I will cry like that, and I always have been like that. But it's amazing when you go decide and go, okay, well, Damon's not going to react like that. How uncontrollable your emotion actually is. There was a moment in Military Council a couple of events ago. There was a couple of people stepping down from their positions, and one of the generals gave this speech about, it was a very like evoking speech. It was like, oh yeah, I'm leaving, and it's sad, but like, and she started going on about how this council has taken so much from her, and I'm like, I can't help. I cannot. I'm trying to be as stoic as I can, but I can't help it. I even try to think of something else, and not be in that moment. I just couldn't help it. I know, because some people have the opposite problem. They struggle to bring that up, but from the other end, it's like, wow, I'm actually struggling to control this.
Yeah, I think I think again, like kind of harking back to some of the safety bit. I think we discover stuff about ourselves that that we never knew. We surprise ourselves, and sometimes we think we're going to cope with a situation and we don't, and that's fine. That's obviously, it doesn't feel fine at the time, but that's we're all humans, and we've not experienced every situation, and the combination of scenario, the situations that build up to that unique moment can set us off. And I think I think I think we have to be gentle and kind to ourselves as people playing this game. That we're going to hit triggers that we're going to sometimes find ourselves overwhelmed, and we need to take time out, and we need to give ourselves that time, and be kind to ourselves, and not feel like we're failing or whatever.
It's difficult because you're you're purposely pressing those buttons, aren't you? Like, it's a strange activity really to take part in. You're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to put myself in these positions, and then when something comes up and you're like, oh no, I didn't like that. It's like, well, yeah, you went in and you went in and did it. You mentioned go on, sorry, Robyn.
No, I was just going to say, like, I'm kind of the opposite to the pair of you. I'm not a crier, and I hate crying, and I don't cry, and I LARP for me was so bizarre the first time I actually ended up crying, because the first time I ended up crying, even though it was all to do with what was happening in the moment in LARP, it was also my first ever experience of bleed. Right. When we died and I was crying on that battlefield. I was like, wow, this is the first time I've cried, like really properly cried. And I thought, I can't stop it. It was like 2 hours of crying and it wouldn't stop. And now every time we're in a situation, I have to mentally prepare myself before going into it. I knew we were going to have a character death last event, and I knew it was going to be upsetting. And I thought, right, I actually had to spend a lot of time in my tent before heading out, because I knew there was going to be tears and I knew it was going to be emotional, and I had to kind of like get myself together. And then after it, I had to go right back into the tent again, bring myself back, and try to kind of like move on from it. I find it so hard to get through that, and for it to be my character crying and not me actually really upset.
Yeah, and I think it's I mean, so the kind of acting that I teach is the kind of technique that I teach is very much about being in ourselves, like as the character, but you're yourself in the situation of the character, and for a lot of characters that's quite a distance from where you are, but imagining that you'd lived the life that they'd led, they'd led up to that point, and therefore you can then kind of connect to it, and when I work with actors, the first time like emotions like that come up, it can take a while for you to be able to push it all back down and feel normal again. I think I think we don't always, we're not used to feeling emotions unless we're pushed into it, other than like happy emotions and stuff. We're generally, whenever we've ever had emotions leak out of us, because it's generally, they are literally leaking out of us. We're trying to hold them in, and they come out. There's so much we can't stop it. We are completely out of control, and we're usually in a dangerous situation. And so of course we build up a kind of anxiety around that, and a discomfort around that, feeling those emotions. So the kind of acting technique I do is really just like a lot. It's a very simple exercise where people just repeat things backwards and forwards, like really inane just observations about behavior. But you try and let go, and then feelings come up. And the first time it happens, it's always like, oh my God, what happened there? Why? I'm crying, and I know why I'm crying. But by exposure and being in a place which is affirming and non-judgmental, and actually, positively affirming, like, yeah, you cried, wow, because we're actors, and that's what we're trying to do, be able to access that stuff. You kind of end up becoming more comfortable with it, and it's like, oh, it's just a bodily sensation, that we go through, and then I know I can survive it, and I know I can come out at the end of it, and I know that I'm in an environment that is not going to judge me for it. And I think, again, LARP, it's not always there is some bit judgmental stuff there, but I think as a community, I think as a whole, we understand that we're playing characters, and actually it has that same thing with acting. When you see someone getting emotional, generally, people go, oh wow, that's really good role play going on. I think where it gets kind of complicated is where we're trying to be competent at something, and then our anxieties and fears, and then if we burst into tears when we're trying to do a performance, or we're trying to speak to the military council or whatever, because we're just overwhelmed, then that can feel really negative. And we won't necessarily always have a positive response from people around us. I think hopefully people are can be aware, and there's enough people who are aware who can go, right, okay, so that's an out of character thing, we're going to look after that person.
And all emotions aren't like treated equally as well in this circumstance, because we say emotions, and most people, in the context we're talking about it, people might think crying, or or fear in a moment, but things like anger, so if you go, right, I'm going to try and evoke anger, and then you're like you're saying, it's a natural response when you cry. There's your body is doing something, you're crying, but anger is also something that just once you're angry, you're angry. You can't, it's not a switch you can switch off. And if you've pushed your character to that limit, or another character to that limit, and they're now having an angry response, obviously the kickback is usually always negative, whereas maybe it should be, like you just said, Martin, be treated like, oh, this person is actually upset. Maybe we should just go, okay, this person is actually angry. Let's make sure they're okay. Let's look after them, make sure they're okay, because they've tread into this bit of water that's deep, and they've gone, oh, I'm having an actual anger reaction to this. That happens a lot. I think that happens more than people like to admit, to be honest.
I think, you know, one of the I think one of the danger areas in LARP, particularly, and I think this is very true for long running LARPs, is that we have goals out of character that we're trying to achieve, you know, and so we can get real frustration when that we're struggling with that, you know, or or like you say, you know, we set this idea that we want to be this type of person, but we're not being received that way, or people aren't responding to us in the way that we want us to, and then that can feel trigger our kind of personal anxieties and what have you, you know. So and I think, I mean, I love doing small events where I'm an NPC, because for me, I'm not very good at being horrible characters unless I'm an NPC, because if I'm an NPC, I know that I've been asked to do it, so someone's given me license to do it. But also I know, particularly in a like a one-off, I love one shots, because if I end up killing someone's character, it doesn't really matter in the long term. It's, you know, like, and when I've played one shots, you know, like if my character dies on the first day, it's like, oh well, wasn't expecting that, but there you go, that's all right. It's just, I can maybe NPC for the rest of the event, I don't know, or whatever. But when you're at kind of like something like Empire, which is you know, like people's plans extend over years.
People invest time and money sometimes into these plans.
Yeah, even like the, you know, the out of character costs of getting a new kit for your new character. They're all things that weigh on us, you know, when we're playing those games. So I think it's a difficult path to tread without sometimes out of character getting affected. I think when our characters get frustrated, and it really has nothing to do with our out of character agendas, or, you know, and it doesn't feel like it's something that's we out of character have failed by being not competent enough or whatever, then I think we deal with the emotions reasonably well, you know. I think, and that's something we can learn to get very good at over time. But yeah, when it does connect to our own personal issues in and out of character, that I think that's when you get that real bleed, and we end up questioning ourselves or getting angry with other people, and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned imposter syndrome earlier as well, and that's a kind of, you know, alluding to what you're talking about, because I struggle with that quite a bit at the last event, mainly because I was kind of thrust into a lot of situations where a lot of people seem to have, you know, hard skills, and you're just like, wow, I do not know what I'm doing here. People are like looking to me to do stuff, and I'm like, oh, I'm out of my, I feel like out of character, like out of my depth, you know. Like, I can understand, but it's such a weird thing, because I know we're all pretending. Like, I know we're all pretending, but it doesn't stop it coming. It doesn't stop the imposter. I know we're all just standing in a field pretending to be people that don't exist at all, you know, and there's not really, you know, there's no actual Druge there. They're not there, but you still get that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're playing D&D, and if you're playing it, or any tabletop, and you're playing it really kind of by the rules, you know, if you say you're a bard, you can say, yeah, I sing a really nice song, and you roll a dice, and you either do or you don't, you know, according to a dice roll. That doesn't come back on you as your hard skills of whether you can actually sing a good song or not. But in LARP, there are always some hard skills. You know, whether it's just your communication skills, you know, there are some skills that you need, and we are all on a continuum of how far we've developed those skills, and we have expectations about where we want to be, or where we think other people want us to be, and that's going to trigger can trigger our
actually that's 100%, like, just you saying that there, actually, like, it's I have my own expectations, but what's really getting me is my assumptions of what others expectations of me, if that makes sense. So, like, what I think other people should expect of me, and not wanting to let them down in a role play. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm not giving them the game that they want, because they expected me to do this, and I don't want to, you know, let my friends down, you know. And it's a bit of an ego thing as well, because you're just like, yeah, you know, these people think I'm a badass. If I fail and trip and fall on my face, they're not going to think I'm a badass, you know, and that sucks.
Yeah. But I think that's something that, I mean, certainly I'm someone who suffers from imposter syndrome all over the place. And there are areas where it doesn't come up, and there's areas where it does, and sometimes it's situational. My last character Osram was a troubadour priest, got a reputation of being good at doing stories and singing songs and what have you. But particularly the storytelling, but there was one time when I was asked to tell a story of someone's test of metal, for the Earls Council in Dawn, and I absolutely fucked it up. I just fell to pieces. I absolutely fell to pieces because I hadn't grasped the details. I hadn't written them down, like of the actual specific details. And I'm there with several people who've been involved with them. And every time I got one of the bits slightly wrong, someone corrected me, and then another person corrected me. And in the end, I literally had a paddy and stormed out, and that's supposed to be something I'm good at, but that imposter syndrome kind of snuck in there and made me, because I could have just gone, well, I'm telling a more, there's the truth and then there's the story, there's ways I could have twisted it, but at the time I just got anxious and fell apart.
Because you can't override it, can you? Because that's the thing. You always, it's, again, I guess it's just expectations, because a lot of the time I do that as well. I'm like, oh yeah, that didn't really go the way I wanted it to go. What I should have done is played it off as this. But in the moment, like you say, you feel the anxiety, and you just like that, flight mode kicks in. You're just like, I just want to be out of here. So I'm gonna make this as short as possible, and then I'm going to leave.
And like everyone was lovely afterwards, and it had, I think it had very little effect on my reputation, so I think we feel it in the moment very strongly, but often it's exaggerated in our heads how bad it was.
I mean, that's a real life thing as well, isn't it? Like you might go, oh yeah, I said that one thing that was silly, and then it haunts you. Sometimes for decades it haunts you. You said that one silly thing and no one else has ever thought about it again, and they're like your view of how another person views you is probably completely different, even if they think of you at all in a lot of cases. So
yeah, I still wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like thinking about a conversation I've had like years ago with someone and being like, oh, that was awful. They probably hate me for it. Or I'm doing the same with LARP, being like, especially because obviously we talk about the events in such detail after it, and then it's for like weeks after I'm like, I really should have stood up and said this in that moment, or I can't believe I didn't know the answer to this. That's what my character's supposed to be good at. That's all they're going to be thinking. And like you just said, everyone's just probably a bit more focused on what they said or did in a situation. That's the reality.
But then, like I think we can kind of take comfort from the fact that you look at our leaders, like in the real world, like, look, I mean, how awful are they sometimes? How big are the mistakes that they make? The stupid little, and these are people who, I mean, if you look at someone like Boris Johnson, he graduated from Oxford. He's not an idiot, but he came over as an idiot a lot of the time. So it's quite possible for that's even as our general in if we are this amazing general that we're playing, or this amazing troubadour, or whatever it is we're playing, the mage who's brilliant at rituals, if we actually were those, we would muck up every now and then, and we'd make a complete tit of ourselves,
and it would be someone else's job to make sure that they're watching all of our fuck ups as well, and assessing us and bringing us into an office and being like, you said this. At least at LARP, once the game's over, you just go, oh well, that went badly, oh well. On we go with our lives.
I mean, I actually think it's a really strong thing for LARP. I mean, I believe LARP has been a really positive experience for me in my life, because it is somewhere where you can practice being these people. We can practice different aspects of ourselves that we're too shy to show in our real life. And we can practice being in situations that we maybe are a bit scared to do in real life. And that does embolden, it's certainly emboldened me. It's allowed me to kind of go into spaces that I wouldn't have gone beforehand. Even like playing Osrin, he was a pride priest, and that meant that he boasted a lot about himself, and I was actually really uncomfortable with that when I first started. But by the end, I was I'm quite good at this.
Well, that's a very like specific Empire, because they've got like pride and ambition, which are like, in kind of modern cultures are seen more as sins than virtue. So yeah, that's one thing I do like about Empire, is that it gives you a safe space to play with something like pride, being like, yeah, I'm really good at this, and I'm going to tell everybody that I'm really good at this.
I mean, as an actor, I've never felt that I was amazing. So I've always I won't boast about my acting, but my teaching acting, that's where it's kind of crept into. I unashamedly say I am very good at teaching the particular technique that I teach. Yeah. And I don't think I would have been able to do that as confidently before I played Osrin.
Yeah. You get comfortable in certain facets as well, don't you? I mean, certain parts of role. I mean, talking about like saying stupid things, I'll worry about, I said a stupid thing at LARP, but I know a lot of people struggle to speak on the internet, because they go, oh, what if I say something stupid? But when you've clocked in 10,000 hours of talking, you're gonna say stupid things. I've touch wood. I think I've got not nothing too bad yet. But if you just keep doing it, I don't turn the camera on and be like, oh no, what if I say something stupid today? Because you've just have had so much exposure in that. But I guess in certain aspects of LARP, that it's new. It's new waters, and you're like, oh no, I've got all this anxiety. What if I say something, or what if I bottle it in front of 10 people that are generals, and I'm like, but I don't have any problem going on YouTube and talking to thousands of people.
It is literally like that. I mean, I talk to my actors, like like they end up getting very safe in the space where we do the work, but then they have to take that onto a set, and I say, look, don't be surprised if you get on set and you feel stuck emotionally and you can't access stuff, because you're in a new environment.
Yeah.
And you're having to translate, you have to find out, how safe is this environment? Am I safe enough to express this stuff? And that's all on a kind of intuitive, unconscious level. You're feeling it out. And so, yeah, absolutely, you can find yourself kind of retreating a few steps backwards from what you're normally, how competent you normally are in those situations.
Yeah.
You mentioned Osrin a couple of times, and I want to know, first of all, how long did you play Osrin for?
10 years.
Am I right in the assumption that Osrin has probably completely changed a lot of things about yourself? Have you found that Osrin, you mentioned about parts of the acting, and you've mentioned about emotions and being able to access them. Did a lot of that come from Osrin?
Yeah, I mean, and so when I first moved, when our house kind of moved from Varushka to Dawn, which was like beginning of year 2, we moved to Dawn. We all got set kind of tests, and Andy, who's plays Earl Valentin, set my test. And one thing that Andy's very good at is finding stuff that he knows someone needs to kind of, or would be helpful for them to work on. So for me, he said, you got to write a song, and you got to perform it in like 10 nations, all the nations, and you've got to do a story as well. And he knew that I was at a point where I was very self-conscious about my singing, because I'd sung previously, and then I'd spent several seasons working in kind of outdoor venues, historical places, doing a lot of playing pirates and doing a lot of shouting, and my voice had got I'd lost a lot of my range, and my voice had got a bit croaky, and I lost a lot of my confidence in my singing, and it was always a bit shaky anyway. I was never a really confident singer. So having to kind of go out and go around and sing this song, which was the I Am Osrin de Orzel song, um, got me to kind of start to get over that fear.
Yeah.
And then, you know, writing one song after another, it became easier and easier for me. And I don't think I don't have a very good singing voice, in the sense that it's, you know, like in technically it's all a bit over the place. But what I've learned is the kind of the confidence to not care. You know?
Yeah, that's a difficult one to master. Just when you think you've mastered it, just something comes out, you're like, oh, I do care.
What my one at the moment is I'm still trying to learn an instrument and be able to sing and play confidently. I'm still, that's my shaky area. Like I have to, you know, I have to really warm up in kind of like really like nobody really listening to me for a while before I feel like I can really attempt that.
Yeah, I think as well, like going back to like I suppose like the imposter syndrome, that's what kind of triggers it, is that on that, especially with a lot like Empire, where there's so many people, the range of talent, you know, on the field obviously is like, you know, if you go with anything, you know, if you're like, right, I want to go and you know, be a good fighter, there's going to be, you know, 100 people on there better than you want to be a singer, there's going to be 100 people better than you want to be a good speaker, 100 people better than you. So yeah, it's not difficult to feel inadequate, especially when you're trying something out. If you're like, oh, I might want to try and do a bit of poetry, or I want to try and do a bit of this, you know.
Yeah, and right, you know, it gets worse with time. You know, like when we started in, you know, year one and year two, there weren't that many people who were singing and, you know, and calling themselves troubadours and really kind of going for it, and particularly the kind of public speaking and telling stories and things like that. You know, it was a limited pool. Now it's like, you know, there are whole like bands who are even, you know, they do it
Oh yeah,
professionally.
literal professional musicians
Yeah.
are writing songs, which is great for our immersion. You know, it's absolutely amazing. But yeah, for dipping your toe in, I will say though, like I've always been a big fan, even though I never get to go and see it, because I feel like it's unless you're really into it or you're part of Navarre, then you don't really get over there. Is like Songs and Stories, because that is a massively unique environment for people performing. Like it's like the opposite of what we all did at school when most of us got public speaking fear. Was like, oh yeah, stand up in front of class and you've got a load of kids that don't, you know, most of them don't like you, and even the ones that do like you are going to make fun of you anyway, and you know, you're terrified, and then you're told to just go sit down, you don't really get any congratulations. Whereas like Songs and Stories, it's like, hey, you know, come in, have a go, and then as soon as someone goes, oh, if they go, right, no, I'm not ready, they're like, come back tomorrow, no, come back tomorrow, it's fine, yeah. And everyone you get a round of applause, and I'm like, that's there's not many places you can go to get that type of experience as a performer.
No, I think it's wonderful, you know, and I think Empire still doesn't quite have enough of those kind of spaces, really. I mean, one of the things that, I mean, because storytelling is my thing, you know, like I that's where I make, when I'm not teaching, that's where I make most of my money as a performer. I do storytelling around kind of historical venues and stuff. Have I ever managed to do much storytelling at Empire? Not really. You know, it's partly because everyone else is a storyteller. You know, we're all telling stories. You know, so you're kind of, you know, everyone's competing against each other in a way. But actually, like, kind of getting an audience and sitting them down for like 20 minutes or so to tell us a decent, you know, length story, is very hard, because everyone's like time is so like limited. And I think that's where somewhere like Songs and Stories is a really good venue, because that space is dedicated just to hearing performances, and people who are there will stay there for the time that they have allowed themselves to. But there's a constant churn of audience, so there's, you know, so it's a sacred space, you know, for performance. And we don't have a lot of those, I don't think.
No.
Yeah,
so
you're
yeah
not going to get like halfway through a story at Songs and Stories and then have somebody running from military council or something into the middle to announce something. It's not going to happen, because like you said, that's a sacred place. This is what we're doing here, and keep your other conversations out the way.
Establishments are difficult to make though. Like this is the thing, like it's very difficult to just say, hey, this is what we're going to do at this time and this is what it's going to be. Songs of Stories is that way just because it's always been that way, you know. And it's like when people like go on about, you know, how different Dawn is to other nations and the way we do things, and specifically like having, because some of the other nations have things for new players right at the beginning. Like the Wintermarkers have like the moot, the moot, where they stand up and go, oh, who's new? And I know the League do the thing where they go, right, you know, everyone introduces themselves to the new cartels, and everyone goes, all right, okay, these are the people that you need to know, new players. And people have gone, oh yeah, Dawn doesn't do that. And I'm just like, even if I wanted Dawn to be like that, like, you can't. It's difficult to change it. Like, it's difficult to say, right, okay, this is because it's like little actual little cultures, isn't it? And trying to change them is so difficult to do, which is fascinating, sometimes frustrating, but fascinating.
I've been very interested that we've started to get plays, you know, more in the Glory Square. I'm loving this. I think it's brilliant. And people are kind of giving it the time, you know. So that might be, we might find that evolves into something quite more solid, you know.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of the leaguers, like, because obviously that's a big part of their brief, you know, and I think that they've really loved like having somewhere else to go other than the league to go see plays or even perform. So, like, speaking of stories, Martin, what's your? You must have some good stories of Osram, because we've been talking for a while about acting and things like that. We haven't had any actual LARP stories yet. what's your favorite? What's the? There must be a load, but what's your most standout story you have from Osram?
I think like what the last year of playing Osram was that, you know, there are times, and I've heard a few other kind of players talk about this as well. There are times when there are synchronicities, like real world synchronicities in a sense, you know, that aren't plotted out, that just fall into place, that create this kind of magic around a character. And that's what that last year was like. I mean, it was ridiculous as to how much I managed to accomplish that I've been trying to accomplish for such a long time. So and even when things kind of interfered with each other. So I'd been set a Iron Duke's test, and it was to show how much I express how much I loved Lady K, or how much Osram loved Lady K. And I'd done it as a sonnet, you know, so they'd basically given me this quest, which was to write a song or poem or story about the truth of love. But they gave me 7 kind of options of what I could do.
Yes, this is from like a Summer Eternal, right? This is from
that's from Barry and
Barry and the Summer Eternal, yeah.
That's right, yeah. And which I think is an amazing kind of plot thing, and it's a shame at the moment that PD have
got too many people doing it.
I know. You know, because what they did for me, I mean, it was amazing. Like the kind of plot that they put out for me, and I did kind of take it almost. I feel a bit selfish in a way, because, you know, because he, you know, one of the things about Osram is from about the year 2 in, he thought he was an exemplar, and so I always played him as if he was an exemplar, and so they gave me 7 choices. What am I going to do? I'm a knight of Dawn, a knight troubadour. I'm going to do all 7, aren't I? You know, I'm not. I can't just do. Yeah. So it involved kind of bits of research. There was some encounters. So I had an encounter with the Lady of the Semelak. You know, 2 encounters in fact. And there was I kind of went and spoke to some of the Eternals, and, you know, there's all these different bits, and then there's a few other bits that kind of came in as well, that which kind of added to it, and I ended up kind of writing poems and songs, and again, like, I've written my first 2 songs I've ever written from scratch. I've filked a lot of songs, but these ones I actually wrote from scratch, and that was a thing that Osram pushed me to do. I never would have done it without that. And there was like in that last year, there was still like 2 or 3 I still needed to complete, but they all just kind of fell in, you know, right up, so that I was able to kind of ask for my test to be, you know, evaluated or whatever, you know, by Barry for the summer, which meant it was 2 years exactly to the date that I was set the test. in character. Obviously, it was about 4 years because we had COVID in the middle of it. And there was one which I was kind of trying to get some information about this Asavean who was known for, one of his ancestors was a great lover, but in their culture, love is like seen as terrible, like true love, because it makes people do things, they don't stick to what they, it makes them go against the rules, or like might distract them from what they're supposed to do. Well, exactly, yeah, that kind of thing, yeah. And so he was greatly insulted, and so he wouldn't give me any of the information, this Asavean. And I was like, oh god, I really want to get 7 and I can't. So what I ended up doing was I wrote the 7th one was all about how I wasn't able to complete the test, but then turned it around by making this poem that final 7th one. And yeah, so that was one side of it. But then there was like Lady K managed to complete her test of Ardor, so that meant that we could get married for the autumn. And then there was like, there's a bit where I cut my heart out to show how much I loved her.
I recall that moment. Yeah.
and with everything, it was like particularly that last year, I lent into like, okay, so what is the most extreme place I can take that to? I'm not going to back down from anything. I'm going to push it to a more extreme. And she'd kind of she'd fallen in love with someone else as well. And so I could have played the whole jealousy thing, but I thought, no, I'm being an exemplar here. So obviously I can take that on board. And my true love encompasses it, that if she needs to love more than one person, then that's fine. We have a polyamorous relationship or whatever, like that's fine. I can encompass that. That's how much I love this person, because it's fiction. We can go to wherever we want to, we can be outlandish. Yeah. And I was supposed to be kind of proving how much, doing something to prove how much I loved her. But I thought I was having to wait because the other fools had set this test, and I thought I was going to have to wait until a set time and then I would demonstrate it. But the other person had also been set the same test, and they were showing it already. And so she was starting to go, oh, I'm going to go off with them instead of off with you and marry you. At which point I went, oh shit. So I was like, my heart already belongs to you. Doesn't matter what you do, it's already yours. So even if you reject me, you still have my heart, and here it is.
I love how things like that can just happen in the Glory Square, and everyone just goes, "Oh yeah, okay." It's like it's for love. Okay, cool.
It was the different reactions around the Glory Square time. I do remember some people being like, "Oh my gosh, someone's cut," and it changed from you cut your own heart out to the other person cut your heart out, and like it was like changing around the Glory Square, and some people are like, "Oh yeah, well, love's what we do, isn't it?" And other people are horrified.
Yeah. Also, because you were playing that you're playing that exemplar of Blood Pride so well, is that most of the field had caught wind of kind of what was going on anyway. So when we saw you doing it, it wasn't like we were like, all right, okay, yeah, this is this is Osmond's drama going on. Okay.
And so there was just like lots of these little things that just kind of fitted in, and including that, the same time as doing my tests, I ended up being able to become the Night Protector of Summer, and I had my True Lao Vision interview with the Gatekeeper, all within like half an hour of each other, and I managed to be successful on all 3 of them. And so then I got married in the autumn, and of course had an amazing wedding and died the very next day.
Yep.
In absolute true Dornish romance, archetypal story.
Yeah. So I mean that wasn't your death wasn't planned, was it?
No, it wasn't planned. It was completely. I got cut off on the battlefield with about 20 or 30 other Dornish players, and we just got overwhelmed.
That was the was that the, because that wasn't the one we died in. Was that the Zenith one with the Druge,
Yeah,
and
it
there
was.
was, yeah.
Yeah, it was Zenith Druge. Yeah.
Yeah, that was that was rough. You know, a
It's a
lot.
rough
I
one.
mean, we lost a lot of people that event. So, how long ago was that then? Was that must have been like, so that
It was all.
that was autumn before last then?
Yeah, yeah. So 2 years ago,
Time goes
this
by.
autumn. Yeah, I know. And it was, but then I had, because like when you die, you can choose to be terminal or you can just be dead.
Yeah.
And I decided I was going to be terminal. And this one of the songs I'd written um, for the Barion's test was all about Osrin had found evidence. This is one of the other kind of little things that kind of helped me finish everything. He'd found evidence that this is all I see, you know, as in evidence.
Yeah, evidence. Yeah.
You can dispute this in character, absolutely. But here, to his understanding, he'd found evidence that the true loves can find each other again in another life, and so he'd written a song all about this particular story. And the chorus line was, "I will come back to you in another life. I will come back to you." And so, while I was dying, terminal on the battlefield, I was singing this song, crying, until people come and discovered me. And then they kind of, you know, they got me all the way back, and I had something like a 3-hour death scene, basically, with people coming to see me, and I literally was like, how can I play this? You know, how can I find a knife I can twist every person who comes to see me just to make them feel that little bit worse.
Yeah. And we pretty much did similar to that, didn't we, Robyn? It was just like, we were like, you know, we were kind of disappointed that our character's dead, but I'm like, well, we're dead now. We may as well milk it for absolutely everything we
actually experience this part of LARP, I guess. Weren't
Yeah.
expecting to experience this so soon, but here we are. Oh.
And I you know, it's hard, you know, it is hard losing a character you play for a long time. But if there was a time and a place for Osrin to die, that was the most perfect time. I mean, literally, I was, you know, at that event, knowing I was getting married, I was like, you know, in character getting married, I was very much like, I don't know what I want to do next. You know, you know, I'll come up with plans. Don't worry. But right now, I've literally accomplished everything that this character was trying to accomplish. And then to die the next day was like, oh, there we go. You know, it's the perfect end of the story.
Yeah. And how like, out of character did you kind of process it? Were you very disappointed and upset briefly for a long time, or?
I think it's kind of ongoing. It's weird in a way. Like, I mean, it doesn't affect me too much now, but there's still moments you know, it comes back. But certainly for about 6 months, like over that winter, yeah, that was quite hard. I think, you know, my group were very good. So I'm out of character, the leader of House Orzel. So and my mum plays in House Orzel as well. And she's like 18 well, sorry, 70 something. So
21.
Yeah, she's 21. So, you know, so I kind of felt very much that I couldn't go and join another group because I've got kind of responsibilities in the group. But Andy was great at just kind of going, right, you come and write another character, do it right now, don't spend ages thinking about it. We think you should be this, and we want you to still feel like we trust you, like you're an advisor that we all know and have known for a long time. So let's write the background and your position within the family, so that we're not sitting there going, oh, who is this new person, and you feel a bit out. And so they set up you know, and between us we wrote this character that gave me a different thing to focus on. And then we did me and Zoran Jeff did a small event in January before the main one, which helped kind of really establish the character. And like this character kind of predates he's been in the house before all of the Varushkan lot came across and knew Zoran very well. So it was great to kind of build that relationship with Zoran's character.
I always feel bad for people who die like on that that autumn event, because we died in this in the summer event, and then we had basically one event before the end of the year, and it was quite good for us because then it was just like oh well, we're booked for the event, let's get our asses into gear, make a new character. And it was good because then it gave us some excitement for the following year. I think we probably would have struggled quite a bit, like being like, okay, 7 months, 7 months to just kind of like be upset about our character loss, and then then try and get some like enthusiasm for making new characters. I'm definitely not like, we're a year out from yeah, so that summer just gone, yeah, so that's over a year we've been playing our new characters. But yeah, still I'm just like, I'll be in moments with Damon, I'm just be like, oh yeah, Godric would have done this in this situation. Like, if I was Godric, I would have done that. And I still say this out of character. I still say, oh yeah,
Yeah.
if I was Godric, then yeah. But as Damon, no,
I think that. Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say, like, it's one thing that I did find quite surprising when it came to dying was the support from everybody else, and especially those who'd already lost characters in the past. It was almost like that, the amount of people that reached out. It's made me a bit like, oh, like whenever something like that happens now, the first thing I always do is reach out to that person, I see if they want a hand, like bringing their new character into it, because so many groups helped us. The whole Roselle group were one of them that literally, I think I sent my backstory idea to so many people, and everyone helped fill it up to like kind of like distract from what had just happened, because like we were not prepared for the grief that came with losing a character.
Suddenly become empathetic to it, like Robyn said. Like actually, yeah. What you like yourself, Martin? Like I remember when like Osrin went, you're just like, oh yeah, oh no, that sucks. Yeah, year one character, and then like when it happened to us, we were like, oh my god, like these poor people. You're just like, you're like, oh no, sad character death. And then you're like, oh my god, this can be what it's like. I know people have different attachments to their characters, but yeah, we didn't realize how attached we were until we're like, oh wait, they're gone. I can't. Oh, story's over.
I think there's, for me, I think it was when whenever I thought about the relationships that Osrin had, and losing those relationships, I think that was the hard part. And it's kind of it's difficult. I think I've ended up with relationships with people that I had previously as my new character, and in some ways it feels like, there's a part of me that has that imposter syndrome and goes, well, maybe I shouldn't do that, but at the same time, like, they're people that I get on with, and enjoy their company. So it's like, I think in the end, that's going to happen. You're going to fall into the same people.
Yeah.
The what I did make sure of was that, so because Osrin was very much part of the priest game, I've done my best to avoid it. I mean, I've got roped into a little bit recently, but not before trying to get, like, pushing loads of other people to try and sort something out, and then nobody going, oh yeah, all right, yeah, whatever. So, but he's a kind of a political, the advocate, which is a political archetype in Dawn.
Yeah.
So he treats it like politics rather than like religion. So
yeah, you're currently trying to keep our senator right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's it. And it's there's bits of the game that I miss that I loved, and I don't think I'll ever be able to step quite into the same place that Osrin was in, which is the performance side of it. I am a performer. I'm an actor, and I love that. And like I'm still building up my singing again, because I am going to sing, but but Robert needs to be distinctly different from Osrin. It helps that he is a yo folk, and I've kind of lent into giving him a very working class, London accent. And so when he sings very he's a very bawdy singer, whereas Osrin was quite a posh singer, so which makes means I can't sing some of Osrin's songs because they sound awful.
I was gonna ask about, like, because I've thought about this with bards as well, because I know, like, I've got lots of friends that play Empire that are very talented musicians, and their their songs at Empire are obviously very much tied to obviously them, but also their character. And I'm always like, you know, that must be something horrible to lose as a performing character, because you're just like, well, I can't sing my Osrin song as Osrin anymore, you know? And if I sung it as my other character, it would feel a bit odd, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole host of songs that I probably won't ever sing really as Robert. There's I think in the first event I was asked to do a bit of barding, for someone's feast. And so I didn't have many. So I did. I sang one of Ozzin's really classic songs, but I sang, and I had to go. Well, I'm gonna have to sing it like he does. And so I kind of did a bit of a comedy posh voice, So like I was taking the piss out of my own character.
Yeah. I mean, so like Robyn really struggled. Like, I know we both struggled, but Robyn really struggled with the fact that we liked certain aspects of the Empire game, and we were only at that stage a year and 3 of it. So like, yeah, 7 events in. So not we hadn't been playing for like 10 years or something. So we were still just getting our foot in the door of some bits of games. So I know Robyn, you were very much like, oh, I don't want people to think that I'm just playing the same
Yeah,
character.
like I was so like like Oliver had said, like I'd just gotten into certain parts of the game, Night Protector, Winter stuff, getting into Military Council. I just like become a noble in House Mortar. Like everything was just like, yeah, I just got into that. And then I was gone. And all I wanted to do was just step right back into that type of game. And I was so worried out of character that people would sort of like judge me out of character for doing that. And I played with concepts in different houses, in different parts of the games, even in different nations, and none of it felt like it was going to be fun. And it wasn't until someone said to me, "Look, you're there to have fun. You buy the same ticket that everyone else does to go and play make believe and have fun for 4 weekends a year. Do what is fun for you." And that's when I was like, yeah, do you know what? I'm still going to be into military game. I'm still going to have my eyes on certain hats, and I'm going to sit and I'm going to message every single person that out of character I feel really safe with and really close with, and see if we can establish some things in character, because and that's yeah. And so far, I don't think anyone said anything.
No. Well, I know I remember saying to you that it's like, you were like, oh, this is like relationship. Like Martin, you said, oh, the relationships is what you miss. And I remember Robyn, you were very much the same. And I was just like, you're like, oh, Aranel was so, I just like I miss her like, a silhouette, and people knew Aranel. I'm like, well, they did know Aranel, but they enjoy playing with Robyn. Like people want to play with Robyn, not Aranel. Yeah, Aranel's gone, but they're not gonna like if you show up as a new character and say, "Hey, I'm Aranel's sister," they're not gonna go, ooh, and not want to play with you. Like they want to play with Robyn. They want to play. You don't want to. They love Osram, but they want to play with Martin. That's the thing, and it's um yeah, and I totally get it, because I'm the same as well. Because I still do it. I still go, oh yeah, I don't want to be. In fact, I think I went too far off. Sometimes I think I was like this is not going to be Godric, and now I'm just like sometimes the only times I ever miss Godric is if I look at a situation and go, Godric would have more fun in this situation. That's the only time I actually miss him. But
When everybody broke you in the Orzel tent that night.
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, no, I don't know what it was. I think it was Starash. Like I think I don't know what he said. I think he asked Robert about. He was like, do we have any like large crabs? And it's just the seriousness in which he said it. It was just like, it's like what? This is the most silly thing ever.
I think it's I think if you like you say, we're there to have fun. We're paying to go along and have fun, and we're the judges of whether what's right for us at the end of the day. I think if someone's like, yeah, every character they do is an identity kit, and has looks the same, behaves the same, talks the same, has the same skills, but then I don't know, I'm very much, I try not to be too judgmental. You know, I do my best. And I well, because I'm someone who I've always wanted LARP to be something that was as accessible to people as possible. So, you know, we do have people in our house who, like, one or two people who come once a year maybe, or once every couple of years, and they like one aspect of the game, and they don't really get involved with much else, and maybe they're not the best role players, but they enjoy a certain part of it, and I don't see why that should be a problem, as long as they're not interfering with other people's game in a way that spoils that person's game. So if they just like one aspect of it, then they should be allowed to come along and enjoy it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And it's always been, you know, it's always been my attitude. It's that kind of aspirational thing, you know, like that we all start somewhere, and we all, you know, we want to go in a certain direction, but that's a journey, and it starts somewhere, and that place where we start might be quite limited. You know, we have some quite young players come with start with us sometimes, you know, like 12, 13, 14, who take a little while to get on top of all aspects of the game, but they enjoy certain parts, and they slowly develop, and some of those are now, you know, we've had one who started when they were 12, and they're now in their late 20s, and, you know, and doing really, you know, well, actually early 20s, but they're doing, yeah, they're a key part of the family, and they're very good at plotting and politicking.
Yeah. It's difficult, like you say. We try not to be judgmental. I gotta admit, I'm sometimes hard on people, especially on like the battlefield and that don't role play.
Right.
I gotta admit, I do get a little, because I get frustrated with even in tabletop. You know what I mean? I'm not saying everyone has to be, you know, high level, you know, voice acting level kind of improv on a D&D table, but I'm just like, just do we're doing it's called an RPG, let's do some role playing. I know it was getting quite frustrated at the monster battle last event, because when we were monstering, sorry, as the Druge, I just found the whole thing boring, because it's just like there was no role playing going on the battlefield, because it was all just, you know, it was all fair enough, there's, you know, we got hit points and things like that, but if I'm being evil Druge and I'm coming in, I'm like, cleave your leg, and they just like look at you and go, oh, and then they they like take a knee, and I'm like, well, this ain't fun, because I'm committing and you're not really, and then they get back up, and I'm like, well, this is boring, so we just went, you know, where we died, and then we just went out, we're just going go back, because that was boring.
I think it's a funny area, and I might be going to be a bit contentious here, but I think with the battlefields, the battlefields are the most like legacy LARP, you know, that's still around in Empire, and there's certain assumptions about what that should be that haven't really been examined in the same way as other areas of the game, and I think it is slightly detrimental. I mean, for example, there is, if there's an area where there's a bit of toxicity in the game, for me, it's the fact that when it comes to combat, like, people are too quick to kind of say someone's cheating. You know, like, there's this evaluation. There is no other part in the game, I don't think, when you're outside of combat, where cheating is even something that people think about too much. And yet there's this really big focus on the fighting side. And that's not to say that I battle ref, and I very much want everyone to be playing by the rules, and I think it's absolutely important. But there's a tendency for judgmentalism and there's something about the competitiveness in that environment.
Yeah,
and I think
the adrenaline and things like that added into it as well. Yeah,
you know, you know, in many situations there is an explanation as to what's happening. Not always, and you see some flagrant, you know, not necessarily following the rules, which how you would expect, you know. But I think there's a kind of, I don't know, there's just an attitude that I think there's an area which could still be examined, I think, a bit better. Even with, like, you know, the PD, you know, will tell us that they don't want us to role play as monsters. essentially, in the sense that, you know, there's things like honor duels and stuff like that they really don't like. Now I can understand a kind of, to be aware of your environment and to go, if you do an honor duel here, you're going to stop 20 players from fighting. But if it's like one Jotun on who's not really in a crucial place who calls out another player, and
you meet in the woods or something.
Yeah, you know, like, to me it's like that's just a bit of role play that can add to a person's game, you know, like and I know there's a managing around cheating and, you know, and all of that kind of stuff, you know, and favoritism between different player to monster relationships and all that kind of stuff that needs to be managed. But I think it's an area of improvement that can still be done, where we can improve that role play experience of being on the battlefield.
I guess it's difficult because it's just the scale, isn't it? Because I know for us, like, we've done, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know whether you've done any kind of cinematic combat systems, Martin, at all. But we've been to a few this year, and I absolutely adore that style of combat, because it's like the opposite. Because the opposite of that, like, hit point, like tippy tappy, like tip tap, it's more of a, I'm carrying it, this is a foam greatsword, but I'm gonna act like it weighs a ton and I'm going to swing it, you know. And when I hit someone, they're going to react because they got hit with a big old greatsword. We were at a Greek mythology LARP recently, Asphodel. And a couple of the crew members were playing like minotaurs, and they had these huge, great big like blocks of like wood and stone, and that they're hitting us. Obviously, they're made of like styrofoam; they weighed nothing, but they were hitting us. And I had my shield, and they got hit, and I fell to the ground. And it was just like creating a story in combat, like we would if we were having a conversation in a tavern. This is the same. Is this the same kind of energy? I understand why we couldn't really do that at Empire. But I think that's one of the issues that you might be raising, Martin. Like the in camp vibe around role playing is very different from the vibe out in combat. You know, out in combat, it feels very much like a game of like American football. It's like, right, okay, we have to win. We won that point. Wait, hang on, no, that's a foul. You know, that it feels very much like that. Whereas in Amble, there's a little bit more of a, let's tell a story together. Let's do something cool. You know.
It's and it's a difficult one. I mean, I love. I mean, I'll be honest here. I absolutely love the almost treating LARP like a sport, and there's a very good reason for that. It's I'm you know, in my group I'm one of the worst fighters. I'm not a particularly good fighter. You know, I've got away with stuff because I'm in a group of people who are good at fighting and have a reputation for it. I don't mind losing. I just want to be better, you know. I just want to do better than I've done before. But what for me about this, it's about being in the moment, and that moment being totally undefined. It's like a sport. Like you watch football. I'm not a big football fan, but you know, you watch a sport like that, and you don't know what's going to happen next because no one on that field knows what's going to happen next. It's absolutely moment to moment to moment, and that's what's exciting for a lot of people. And when if I do watch football, if I watch a World Cup or something, that's what's exciting for me. I don't know from moment to moment what's going to happen. Something crazy could happen in the last minute, you know. And for me, when I'm on the battlefield, or if I'm in a tournament and we're fighting with that kind of rules, it's absolutely brings me into the moment, and I'm like, I get that adrenaline rush. I get that, you know, everything else disappears. All I'm focused on is that orcut's in front of me, or what have you, you know.
Yeah.
And that's exhilarating for me. And I think one of the things I miss in Empire, from like, if I went back to something like the Lorien Trust from years ago, when we used to do small events there, one of my absolute kind of standout experiences was one time where it was in the dark, and there was like a ritual circle at the top of a hill, and most of the player group had gone up there, and all these like undead had come out of the woods, and people, and I'd managed to get back all the way back down to the base camp and tried to get some people to come up and rescue. And everyone else was like on the floor dying, and there was about 5 of us who went up, and I didn't even have any fighting skills. I was literally holding a lantern, and like literally terrified because like these things were coming out of nowhere, and I ended up like carrying like unconscious people, you know, and using them as a barrier so that I wasn't getting hit, you know. And we got to the top, and I managed to bring one person round with a skill, which then led to other people being brought round. But that being in the dark and like literally being actually terrified of things coming, that was an experience. And that's one of the things that always drew me to the other side of, there's the acting side, but then there's the living the experience of being in terror and worrying that you're going to die, your character's going to die, or
the actual
something
immersion
horrible's going to happen.
Yeah. I don't think you feel much more immersed that actually, when you're out in the, like we've done a couple of nighttime skirmishes, and when you're out and you're like, oh, this is actually terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's some of those, and we know, we know that some of those skirmishes are deadly, and so, we've got good cause to be afraid. It's not like, we're confident that we're going to be able to make any skirmish we go on.
Yeah, I mean, I do like, that's the thing. It becomes like that. The LARPs I was talking about earlier, like the cinematic ones. It's a different experience. I mean, I like it at Empire that your character can die, because it gives stakes to something that is a big game. Like you say, if we're doing a cinematic LARP for like a one shot, you're just like, oh cool, I'm going to play a baddie who's going to die, and I'm going to give some people some really good game because I'm going to like die and gargle blood, and it's going to be absolutely awesome. But when you've got a game where you've got resources, and you're collecting resources, and you're collaborating with people, and you've got imperial positions, and you've got magic items, you have something to lose there. So it ups the stakes. And then when you do survive, I've got to admit, some of the best moments I've had at Empire have been like from nearly die, like when remember, I know we've done some really good skirmishes, Robyn, right? Where you've pretty much been in charge, and we smash them every time because you're awesome. But there was that one skirmish before you were Knight Protector, that Agromant skirmish. It was really awful. It went so badly. Everything went wrong. But it's probably one of my favorite LARP stories to retell, because it was just like, how did we get out of that situation? I wouldn't intentionally ever put myself back in that situation, but the fact that it happened the way it did is probably one of the better stories that I have, because there was actual, it was actual danger, and we overcame it somehow.
I do not know how. It was pitch black, and we were cut off from everyone else, and it was so dark, I thought it was Imperials with us, and it was Druge.
No, we were literally, we had an Agromant Herald like right in front of us, which was I think Andy Connell at that point, like in a massive like clawed like suit, and then because we had like a man down call, and I knew that Aranel had like just gone to go fight this monster, and I know our line had like pissed off, so I went to go get her, and then I heard man down, so we all took a knee. And our line is still going. Our line is still going towards the Sentinel Gate, and there's just like two or three of us like on the ground. And I'm like, and I know that Robyn, I can see that Robyn has no idea what's happening. So she's just waiting for like the go, right, time in. And I'm like, oh no. So we go time in, and she runs at this monster and goes, cleave. And I'm like, I don't know, we need to go like now. Like now. Go, run. And then she like turns around and realizes we're just surrounded by Druge. And at that point, obviously, they hear me say, we need to go now, and they're like, huh? Like we just like sprint, and I'm like holding my shield behind like Aranel as this Druge is like trying to pelt her in the back, and I'm just like, that way, I'm just like, the only word I do not want to hear right now is cleave. Just no cleave, because I had like 2 unstoppables or whatever. I was like, do not say cleave, do not say cleave, do not say cleave, and we got out of there. Just got out of there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we got out of there, and as we were running back to our lines, like, finally somebody from our lines hits me in the chest.
Yeah, because we were running so fast at our lines, they came to attack us because it was that dark. We were like, no, it's us.
It was hilarious. But yeah, like, just it's been a while since we've done a nighttime skirmish.
Yeah, again, I don't want to run and jump into those again, but hopefully we won't end up in that situation again. Yeah. Anyway, Martin, we've been very generous. You've been very generous with your time. Now you have a platform. Is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say to the world?
Oh God.
You don't
We're
have
going to be.
to.
Well, if you want to, if you want to see me doing the storytelling stuff, me and Jeff are as Troubadour Tales are going to be at English Heritage at Elton Palace which is one of their properties in London, and that's over the bank holiday, August bank holiday weekend.
Fantastic.
So yeah, do come and see us.
Yeah, I'll put the description, put the stuff for that in the description in the show notes. Are you still doing your workshop as well at Empire? Is that the plan?
Yes.
To keep
Yeah,
doing
absolutely. So Fridays at 1 o'clock in the MC. It's just a kind of public speaking. We only have an hour, so I don't have a lot of time to do stuff, but I can kind of give you some people some to a large extent I use it as a kind of rehearse stuff, like give you a chance to practice something that you're really nervous about, and everyone kind of joins in. But yeah, I've had some very positive feedback from that, so do come along.
Well, yeah, we went not last event, the event before. It was very useful. It was actually quite a good warm up. Actually, just loosening things up, just get the juices flowing, because it's right before time in as well. So
yeah, no, it was amazing. I still use the bits of advice you give me then. It still comes into my head before certain situations, and it's just like helped the game so much since then. So yeah,
excellent. Fantastic. Thank you for coming on, Martin. We'll say goodbye to the podcast, everyone. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for stopping by. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know down in the comments. Click that like. Make sure you're subscribed and following on all of the platforms so you know when new content comes your way. I've left the info for Martin's work event he's got coming up this week. We will, of course, be continuing our recap of Empire LARP E3 later on in the week. We just thought we wanted to get this episode out and squeeze in here while we had Martin available for a conversation. Until the next time, though, we love you very much and stay safe.